In June 1977, the FBI raided Scientology in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. to find out what Scientology was doing, infiltrating the United States government. L. Ron Hubbard didn't stick around to find out what was going to happen next. He went on the run with 3 of his messengers and hid out in Sparks, Nevada. You're going to hear the story about what happened during that time with photos that you've never seen before. It's an interesting story. Stick around. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. I'm here with my co-host, and today she's going to be our guest, Janis Gillham Grady. How you doing, Janis?
Good, Mark. Good day, everybody. I'm excited about being the guest because we're continuing our Commodore's Messenger series.
That's right. That's right. What's it like to be a messenger for L. Ron Hubbard? And this picks up in the late 1970s, doesn't it?
Yeah, it starts actually it's actually 1977. And
Right.
it's funny because though a lot happened, it was a short amount of time that I'm going to cover. It's only it was a 6-month time period.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to let our viewers know there's a whole series of these. This is the 9th one we've done about being a messenger for L. Ron Hubbard, with the history and photographs and all that sort of thing. So you can actually go. There's a playlist on our YouTube channel called L. Ron Hubbard and His Messengers, and you can watch them in any order that you like. And you can watch this one right now too without watching the earlier ones. But we're basically doing a comprehensive history of Janis's life working for L. Ron Hubbard, as well as with her friends as messengers for L. Ron Hubbard. So it's always fun because there's always photographs that I've even never seen before. So I'm looking forward to this as well. Shall we get started?
Yeah, let's get started. So it's July 1977 when the FBI raided the manor where Celebrity Center is now, and the complex, the Blue Building, Big Blue, and Washington, D.C. Scientology. So the FBI raided. Hubbard is living in La Quinta, and Mary Sue is also living in La Quinta. And they have a house there that they live in, which is called Rifle. And this is the layout of Rifle. I've covered it in other videos as well. But at the top of the picture, there's a little building, and that's the stables, and that's where storage was. And then you can see a long driveway down the left side. Right. And then a driveway that goes across to in front of that house. Mm-hmm. It was like a horseshoe driveway. And that house is where Hubbard lived. In the lower right-hand corner was the guest house. And what was there was Mary Sue's bedroom, and then a kitchen, and then LRH's bedroom. And the messengers used to sit in the kitchen while LRH was sleeping, which Mary Sue hated because she never had her own privacy. She'd just come in and kind of ignore us, or sometimes say hello and go to her bedroom. But she couldn't use that kitchen or just hang out herself. She would have to have done that in the main house, which is on above the top of that swimming pool there. Now, that's also...
Was there a swimming pool there then at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And would they swim there? Would they swim in there at all? Hubbard?
I never saw. Hubbard did a couple of times, not a lot.
Okay.
But and Mary Sue, I never saw her swim. But yeah. Anyway, on that house, all the rooms were around the outside with a courtyard in the middle. And the top right-hand corner of that house is where Hubbard's office was. Now, when I first showed up, Hubbard was having problems with his stomach. and he had like a lounge chair, and he had a tall desk that came kind of chest high. And instead of sitting in the chair and at a desk, he would stand at that desk and just write whatever or give dictation to us, because when he sat down, it was hurting his stomach. And I remember being very surprised because I didn't know what Melanta was, and I was on, and he's like, "Go get me some Melanta." Okay, what the hell is Melanta? Anyway, I went to his bathroom. I found Melanta and took it to him. But yeah, he had a lot of stomach problems with acid at that time period. Anyway, so when the FBI raided, Mary Sue stayed behind, and Hubbard left with 3 messengers. And he didn't leave in his Cadillac. He had a Dodge Dart. He didn't leave in that, nor did he leave in his Chief Cherokee, which the messengers used to drive him around the Kinta base. And that's John Brousseau, who was LRH's transportation. And he
Janis, your microphone's breaking up.
Okay.
There you go. That's better.
All right, good. All right. So anyway, John Brousseau used to work on all of Hubbard's cars. And this is the Chief Cherokee that the messengers used to drive him in. And it was a 4-wheel drive, but it was a 4-wheel drive that, to put it in 4-wheel drive, you had to get out and put a key into the wheels to put it into 4-wheel.
Right.
And I remember many times getting yelled at because I had to drive through mud and I haven't put it in 4-wheel drive. And anyway, but yeah, we would drive Hubbard around the La Quinta base, where we had several different buildings, and Cine had not started yet. It wasn't even a thought. So this was when Hubbard wanted to get auditors to come in, and I'd done that recruitment mission, and I'd gotten a whole bunch of Class 6 and above auditors, and Hubbard was just starting to work with them when the FBI raided. So, all right, so Hubbard's like, he's going to get out of here because they raided. He doesn't want to be found or caught or anything like that. So what messengers are to go with him? Well, let's see here. This is the messenger's car. Well, this isn't it, but it gives you an idea of what the car looked like. It was a gold station wagon, and we called it Beauty. And instead of taking one of his cars, he decided he was going to go in Beauty. So Beauty was parked up at the back of Rifle, which is where he lived. And it was decided that Claire, this is Claire Rousseau, and she was one of the original Commodore's messengers with me, starting in 1968. So it was decided Claire would go, and her husband, David Rousseau, was going to go as well. However, because he grew up on the ship from the age of 12, he had no life experience. He had no credit cards. He had nothing in order to establish Hubbard somewhere. So Pat Broker was picked. Now, Pat at this time was married to Trudy, but Trudy happened to be in Clearwater on the rehabilitation project force. So Pat was pretty much single and available to go with Hubbard. And then Dee Dee was also picked. So Pat had Dee Dee Riesdorf. Yeah. So Pat had the credit cards. He had the know-how. You know, he'd gone through college. He'd been a bass player in a band. He'd been a flag banking officer, and he used to deal with banks and stuff like that. So, and he'd been at Boston Org. So he had more experience than anybody else. And when Hubbard's father passed away, Pat was the public relations person for Hubbard that was sent off to handle Hubbard's estate, his father's estate. Yes.
So is that Dee Dee on the left, and who's that on the right?
I don't recognize who that's on the
Okay.
right, but yes, that's Dee Dee on the left.
It's not her brother, Gary? It kind of looks like
No.
Gary, but no. Okay.
No. Yeah. Anyway, so those were the three picked: Claire, Pat, and Dee Dee. So they take off, and the rest of us are assigned to, we have to vet. In case the FBI raided La Quinta, we had to vet all the documents to show Hubbard was not there.
Can you explain what does
Well,
that
that's
mean?
what I'm about to say.
Okay.
So vetting meant that we had to go through everything that was typed up, or every advice from Hubbard, anything handwritten by him. We had to go through that and vet with an X-Acto blade his name, R, because that would indicate R, which was Ron, wrote it. And anything that would kind of indicate that it was connected to Hubbard, you had to, with an X-Acto blade, vet it out. I mean, it was really stupid, and no one really thought the thoughts through. And they're vetting everywhere, even the Guardian's office and worldwide, they're vetting stuff. But you look at the documents and it's like, well, why'd they take the R out? Or why are they even trying to hide that he wrote this? Well, it's because he wasn't supposed to be managing.
Right.
So
Can I ask you a
anyway,
question?
yes.
Can I ask you a question? Who was in charge of the messengers? Like, was there a commanding officer then? And then can you remember some of the messengers that were there working on this vetting with you?
Yeah, well, Annie Broker was Annie Rush at the time. She was married to Charlie. She was the commanding officer. Mm-hmm. And Gail Riesdorf was there. And myself, I was there. My sister-in-law, Doe, was there. I believe my sister was there at the time, Terry.
How about my ex-wife, Julie?
Yeah, Julie would have been there. David Rousseau, David Miscavige, Shelley Barnett. She wasn't married to David Miscavige at the time.
Right.
And I think that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, and Mark Yeager was there.
Okay.
So anyway, so we're doing these projects, and then it was like, it was getting ridiculous. There was so much. So we actually put a whole bunch in garbage bags, and we had a property that was called Silver. And Silver was a big orchard of grapefruit trees. And so we went out to Silver and we dug this huge hole, and we would put the garbage bags in there to hide all his advices. And I remember one day we had to find a certain advice, and it was pouring with rain. And Gail and I are out there with the rain just pouring down, digging up these garbage bags, dragging them over to a shelter shed, and going through trying to find what we needed. But it was just insanity, Anyway, so this was how things were vetted. And I remember, I don't know who called, but I remember during that time period when they'd left, using Hubbard's Dodge Dart and driving into La Quinta, actually into Indio, and having to go to a payphone and sending messages over the payphone. But I don't even remember who it was to. But anyway, it could have been the Pat.
Can I ask you a couple questions? When Hubbard left because of the raid, was it like immediately, like overnight, or was he there for a few days and then left, or was it like, we got to get out of here like right now?
Instant. Okay. So Hubbard leaves with Claire, Dee Dee, and Pat, and they go to San Bernardino, and they find a motel, and they stay there for the night. Mm-hmm. Now, and the first thing they did was go to a store and get hair dye. And they dyed each other's hair. And they even dyed Hubbard's hair. And Claire had to cut Hubbard's hair because he had grown it. So Claire cut it. And Dee Dee always said it looked like she'd put a bowl on his head. and cut it. And you got to remember, Claire wasn't a hairdresser. I mean, she was with me from the age of 12 years old on the Royal Scotsman. So she had no worldly experience, just like me.
You guys were fugitives. You guys were acting like fugitives, like the FBI was after you. I mean, because they actually raided. I'm sure you're worried about that. So it was like, change our identity. That's pretty wild.
Absolutely. So yeah, so they all dye their hair, all 4 of them, and load back up the car. Now, Claire, when they were loading up the car, put her purse on top of the car. They drive off. She's lost her purse, her driver's license, her passport, everything is in that purse. So that was, she had to get it all new again, but that was like an issue for the start of their trip. And then Hubbard's like, okay, let's head for Reno. So they go from San Bernardino and they're heading up to Reno. And I got some notes here. And anyway, on the way up to Sparks, which is just northeast of Reno, they're headed up there in Nevada. And on the first day from the hotel, Hubbard wasn't feeling well. And, you know, he was having stomach problems. And I remember on the ship, he used to tell me he had shrapnel in his stomach, and that's why he had tummy aches. But I never saw any scars on his body or anything like that. But anyway, here he is now having problems with his stomach. So they make an appointment with a doctor, and they go in there. Now, he's not going to show any ID who he is. They're all under fake names. Claire and Pat are pretending to be a married couple, and Dee Dee is Claire's sister, and Hubbard is the uncle. So Hubbard comes into the doctor's office dramatizing that he's really sick and in pain and he's bent over. And Dee Dee and Gail are like, he needs help. Can you please help him? And in those days, you didn't need to show ID or anything like that. And they were going to pay cash.
Right.
So Dee Dee and Claire are crying, trying to get their poor uncle in because look at him, he's in so much pain. He gets into the doctor's office, and poor Claire and Dee Dee are sitting outside, and they hear him laughing. He's no longer in pain or anything. He's in there telling stories to the doctor, and they're laughing away, and they're like embarrassed at the whole show performance they put on to get him in there, because now there's nothing wrong with him the way he's, laughing away with the doctor. Anyway, the doctor prescribed, said he had ulcers and prescribed an antibiotic and something else. Anyway, so then they finally continued on their way and got to Sparks. And in Sparks, Pat's job is to get an apartment. And meanwhile, until that's done, they're staying in a hotel. And then Pat gets the apartment, and Claire starts doing the cooking, and Dee Dee does the cleaning, and Pat does the errands, which include, going to the laundry and getting all the clothes washed and that type of thing. And in comparison to how we grew up on the ship, Hubbard was always complaining about his clothes smelling and there's dust in the room. And, Dee Dee dusted that apartment with a feather duster with dust flying everywhere as you feather it off. And Claire didn't know how to cook either, and Pat would just do his errands and disappear or whatever. So Claire one day is cooking. She's heated up oil. She's going to make French fries for dinner. It catches on fire.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, but she doesn't think, pick up the lid and put the lid on it to put the fire out. No. She goes out to the balcony to pull the fire out. Well, the neighbors downstairs have an umbrella up, which catches on fire.
This sounds like the Three Stooges or the Keystone Cops.
So now the neighbor's umbrella's on fire. Pat quickly runs down there and gets it put out, and is now having to calm down the neighbors because Claire's trying to burn them out. Anyway, so the living arrangement is it's a 2-bedroom apartment. Hubbard is in one room, and the 3 of them are in the other room. So they took turns on. Usually, Pat slept on the floor, and the girls got the bed. And anyway, so that was their living arrangement. And in the evenings, Hubbard would go for a walk every day after dinner. He'd go for a walk, and Dee Dee would go for a walk with him. They never had it so that they were all seen together. So Dee Dee was the only one being seen by Hubbard, and they would go for walks at nighttime. And his mood was very different to how it had been when we were on the ship or even at La Quinta. He wasn't angry like he normally would be dealing with management and tech. He had nothing to worry about, and he would just go for walks with Dee Dee and sing songs. And they'd go in the supermarket, and there was a casino there. So Dee Dee was, probably 19 at the time, and he would push Dee Dee onto the carpet where if you're under 21, you're not allowed to be on the carpet. Right. So he'd push Dee Dee on there and then kind of joke that he's trying to call security on her, that she's in the casino section. And it was all very lighthearted, that time period that they were there.
Yeah.
And then, anyway, so they had their fake names. And Hubbard had no trouble with the smells, no trouble with the laundry. I'm just going through my notes here.
That's okay.
And
did they wear disguises or anything like that, or hats? Or
yeah, they did. They did wear disguises, and Hubbard, of course, would tell Pat, "Okay, this is what you do to change your face. You put cotton balls up in your mouth, and it changes the shape of your face, And then you got fake hair underneath her hat, and glasses, and So he would give long little talks or lectures or advice, whatever you want to call it, on how to disguise themselves so people wouldn't recognize them. And then, and then it was Dee Dee's 20th birthday while they were there. And they also had a Christmas there together. Yeah. But, so Pat went out and got a present for her from Hubbard, which was a suitcase and a winter coat. And and they had birthday cake and, just sit around and talk. And every night, their ritual when Hubbard was going to bed, the 3 of them would be there with him. And they'd all talk about the day and what happened, or Hubbard would sit there and tell his stories like he used to do on the ship and in Dunedin and so forth. Dee Dee would give him a back massage every single night. And Claire and Pat would sit on the floor, and one of them would hold the ashtray, and he would smoke and flick his ash in the ashtray while they're just hanging out talking. And usually after dinner, Dee Dee and he would go for a walk, and then they'd all sit down and watch a movie. And because Hubbard liked to have the volume up high, they all ended up getting headphones. And they'd all sit there with headphones on because the neighbors were complaining of how high the TV volume was. Anyway, let me see.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
What did Hubbard do all day? Was he work? I mean, were they in communication with Mary Sue or or was it just basically do nothing all day?
Yeah, the first 3 months, they were not in communication with anyone. They were just the 4 of them off of their own world. And this is when Hubbard, they must have brought a typewriter with them, because Hubbard used to dictate to us, and we'd sit there and just type straight into the typewriter while he's dictating to us. So they must have taken the typewriter with them, because while they were gone is when Hubbard started writing the movie Revolt in the Stars. And that's a whole nother story on itself, on trying to get that sold as a screenplay and get it into the movie industry and so forth. So Hubbard did that, and meanwhile, back in La Quinta, Mary Sue's now in charge. And there's a picture of Mary Sue. Anyway, so she's now in charge of La Quinta. And Hubbard, he always ran tighter schedules and so forth. And Mary Sue was wonderful. She lightened our schedule. We were like the Guardian's office, and we had evenings off. And we used to go to the swap meet in the evenings, and we'd go to the movies. Sometimes we'd even go dancing during the week. We'd go into Palm Desert and we'd go dancing at Geronimo's, or we'd go into Palm Springs and we'd go dancing at Zelda's, or on our liberties, we used to pile in to a car, another station wagon that was there. We'd pile into that and we'd go off and do different things.
Now, you were underage then, right? How'd you get into the discos and go drive?
No, I had just turned 21. Yeah, so the car kind of looked like that. And we used to joke that it was the gardener's car because we were used to driving around in beauty. And now we had this old station wagon. And so we'd joke. And it was funny. I remember one time when we went to the movies in Palm Desert, and we're coming out of the movies, and there was Bob Rounds, Cooper Rounds' older brother. And their mom lived in Palm Desert.
Oh.
So he must have been there visiting, and we're like, oh my God. Well, of course, everybody's like trying to hide from him. But a lot of people never actually saw us, but Bob did see us.
Okay.
And it was just kind of, we're here. We came up for the day from LA or something stupid.
Oh.
Little did he know we were just 15 minutes down the road in La Quinta.
Right.
Anyway, so let me go back to those other pictures because I was going to show Mary Sue's team of people.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So Mary Sue's communicator was Nikki Merwin, and that's her husband, Rick Merwin, who was he was one of the staff aides for Hubbard at one point. Anyway, Nikki had been with Mary Sue since, probably 1969 or late 68. She'd been on the Avon River. She came over to the Scotman. She was the mimeotypist, and she was a great typist. And that's when she was picked to be Mary Sue's communicator. Nikki actually came from Las Vegas. She had been one of the dancers, with the big hats. She used to a showgirl. She told me a story once of where she had her big hat on and they're doing their dance and they're coming down the stairs, and her hairdresser was in the audience and she had a crush on him, and she'd pulled all her hair up and it was this little thing sticking up like this under her big feathered hat. And she's coming down the stairs and doing this kick as she's coming down the stairs, and her heel got caught on the steps and she went tumbling and her hat came off, and she's sitting there with this little sprout of hair sticking up. She was so embarrassed. And then another Scientologist who was on the ship at the time, Judy Lewis. Anyway, she was a dancer with Nikki, comes running over, picks up the hat when you're not supposed to get out of line, but she picks up the hat, puts it on Nikki's head, and gets back in line and keeps dancing. Anyway, I always thought that was a cute story of, a dancer in Las Vegas. Anyway, so Nikki was there. She was living at Rifle. She had an office there, and which was also her bedroom. And she had a little fish tank in there and a little shark of some breed. I remember her showing me, this is my shark pet, my pet shark. Anyway, so Nikki was there. And along with Nikki was right here in the kind of orangey brown jacket in the front with the white ascot. That's Fred Hare. Fred Hare had been around forever. And I bring him up in my story in Tangier when I had a motorbike accident. Fred was assigned by Hubbard to to drill me on motorbikes. And that's all covered in the Messenger series in Tangier. Anyway, so Fred was the assistant controller for Snow White. He ran the Snow White programs of which resulted in the various Guardians Office people infiltrating the U.S. government.
Right. And that's why they raided.
And that's why they raided. Well, Fred was the top dog on that, directly under Mary Sue, running all those projects.
Wow.
So, and also in this picture, next to Fred, towards the middle, that's Fred. He was also Guardians. He was our PR. And then Rick Merwin's there, and then Sheldon Rizal and Peter Vogading.
Oh, wow.
Fred Rock. That's who that is, Fred Rock.
Okay.
And you can see here the long hair look, and this is how the crew at WHQ, Winter Headquarters in La Quinta, looked.
Right.
Now, Mary Sue's assistant controller for intelligence was Jimmy Mulligan. This is a picture, this red-headed gentleman getting food. He was on the ship when the ship was being shut down. All the non-Americans left. He's American, so he stayed behind. Anyway, so he was Mary Sue's assistant for intelligence. So he also was part of the whole thing of infiltration of the government through his intelligence division. He was over B1.
So these are the guys that were actually running the whole show between Mary Sue, Nikki Merwin, Fred Hare, and Jimmy Mulligan. These were the people that really the FBI would find out later were involved in this whole thing, right?
Correct. And Jimmy Mulligan's wife was Anne. Anne used to be married to Wally Burgess, and then she later married Jimmy. She's there in her minister getup, as she was the minister for Gail Riesdorf and Steve Irwin. And this when they got married. And they got married while Hubbard was in Sparks. Because you got to remember, in the Messenger Series 8, I talk about Gail being the messenger that was seeing Steve Irwin when Hubbard punched him.
Because of the tree spikes, right?
Because of the tree spikes, right. And Hubbard said, which one of you is shacking up with this guy? Well, they weren't shacking up, but they were dating and seeing each other. Whatever dating means, since you don't go anywhere.
Can you name the people in the photos?
Yeah, I can. So from left to right, that's Steve Irwin with his lovely bride, Gail, and they're still together today. So this is in 1977.
Right.
And this is Dee Dee's sister, yeah.
Yeah.
And then next to Gail is Lois Jory Riesdorf. She married Gail's brother. And she's from South Africa. And then in the green dress is Doreen Gillham, my sister-in-law. And then that head in the middle poking through, that's me. There wasn't enough room in that room for me to stand next to Annie. And that's Annie there. Okay. So I just stood in the back because there wasn't enough room. And then here's the other angle where from right to left, that's Lois as the maid of honor, Gail and Steve. And then in the back there, I think that's Ralph Kernbach. And then Gary Riesdorf, Mike Douglas. And then between the podium and Anne Mulligan, it's very dark, but that's David Miscavige.
Oh, wow. Now, Gary was married Lois, right? So they've been together, and they're still together, just like Gail and Steve are. They've been together all these years, haven't they?
Yes. Yeah, Gary and Lois, I think they got married at the end of 76. It was before I got to Winter Headquarters, they got married.
Okay.
And Gail and Steve got married while I was there, but while Hubbard was gone and while Dee Dee was gone.
Was this wedding at the rifle La Quinta location?
Yeah, this was in the dining hall building. It was a house which was called Palms. And in this house, the crew kitchen was downstairs in the dining room, and the basement was qual with a course room where everybody studied. And then the couple of bedrooms upstairs was Gary and Lois and Kimma and Mike Douglas. Oh, here's the best men. Back left to right, that's Mark Ferreira, nickname was Muff.
Right.
And then Ralph Kernbach, or Raj, that was his fake name.
Secret name. Yeah, fake name.
Yeah. Steve Irwin, Gary Riesdorf, and Stu Moreau. And Stu's been on our show. We've done several interviews with him. And our next interview with him is actually going to cover this time period of La Quinta and the setting up of Cine. And then in the front, in the blue suit on the right, that's Mike Douglas. And next to him on the left is David Miscavige. He was the ring bearer in this wedding.
He had to be, what, 16, 17 years old?
Yeah, he was...
probably 17.
17, yeah, he had just turned... Yeah, he'd just been turned 17. Okay, and here's a picture of Mike Douglas and Kimma, just so people get an idea of who I'm talking about. Mike was in charge of Hubbard's external communication office, and Kimma was in charge of Hubbard's household unit.
Right.
Now, up until Hubbard left, Kimma and Michael had gone with Hubbard when he went to Washington, D.C. They traveled to California with him. She's the one that had Hubbard taken to the dentist and got his teeth all cleaned. She took him to a doctor to get the cyst on the top of his head removed. And she was basically his nurse on the ship, and as well as in charge of his whole household unit. Now, as soon as Hubbard left for Sparks, Mary Sue, heading up the Guardian's office, she obviously had issues with Kimma, because with Hubbard gone and not there to protect Kimma, Kimma became a target of the Guardian's office. And Anne Mulligan, who I told you, she was the assistant controller for legal.
Mm-hmm.
She and Jimmy ended up having Kimma. She was removed from the household unit. She was put on grounds work. She was not allowed to be talked to because she was a suppressive person. And I remember I would, whisper things to her and hope that the Guardian's office didn't see me talking to her, because Kimma had been like a mother to the messengers. And when they all got married, she was always there, doing the makeup, making sure everything was perfect. And she was just always there for us. Anyway, so while Hubbard was gone, she was going through hell with them set checking her, doing security checking, spreading rumors that she's a big liar and she makes stuff up, and she never met certain people who she said. I don't know what's true or not, but we all loved Kimma. And It was very hard on us to see this happening to her. But when Hubbard came back, she was right there for him. And she probably never even told him the hell that they'd put her through. Okay, this is me at this time period. I just turned 21. And this is what I looked like back then. Anyway, continuing on here. Oh, this is Shelley Barnett. She wasn't married to Miscavige yet. And David Rousseau. They're leaning against my little 64 Mustang. And this gives you an idea of the date fields that we lived in La Quinta. We had the different houses, and to get from one place to another, we had these date fields all around us with rattlesnakes and that type of thing. Anyway, there's Gail and Steve. They were going out on Liberty. Now, those doors at the La Quinta property in Olives led to the library, and in the library was the men's dorm. And this was a huge library with one of those ladders you can climb up to get to the upper bookshelves, and all covered with books that came with the property. Attached to this library was a kitchen, because it was a whole little house in itself. And we sat in that kitchen manning the phone 24 hours a day in case Pat, Didi, or Claire called. We manned that phone. And on the other side of the kitchen, in the breakfast nook, is where David, Rousseau, and Claire used to live. But then there was sheets put up or whatever to kind of separate it out. And David Rousseau, every night to go to sleep, would play Olivia Newton-John. And so whoever was on watch manning the phone would have to sit there every night and hear this over and over and over. Anyway.
How often would their calls not come very often, I take it, right?
They never came. But I will get into another story on that. Yeah, I don't remember that phone ever ringing.
Okay.
And there's the car. Okay. So anyway, we would have nothing to do. And let me find it here. I think I put it in here. Right here. Annie and I used to make meringue. We had a whole kitchen, so we were like, oh, let's do something. So we'd make meringue. And then I'd go, oh, let's do a pavlova. And we'd go get whipped cream and we'd get fruit and we'd make a pavlova, which is an Australian dessert with meringue.
Uh-huh.
And so that was fun and kept us occupied while we were in there, doing nothing. Anyway, continuing on with our liberties, with Hubbard gone, it was the first time we were able to go on liberty together as messengers. Because otherwise someone was always on watch, or two people were on watch, or three people were on watch. So we put together a group of us, some of the crew from Winter Headquarters and Messengers, and we took two cars. Arthur Hubbard had a car and the messenger car, piled it up with people, and we went inner tubing. We'd drive to Blythe. We'd drive to Blythe, and we would spend the day inner tubing and get sunburnt and so forth. But we had so much fun.
That's Blythe, California? Blythe, California?
Well, that's just some pictures I got just to kind of.
No, but I meant that's where you went. You went to Blythe, California. I got it.
Yeah, but Blythe, California. We went there. Yeah. Anyway, and then driving back, it was a long distance, and we would play cat and mouse in the car. One car passes the other, and would put up signs as we go by one car, and the other one put up a sign going by the other. And then we started mooning each other, As one car goes by, there's a couple of butts up against the window. But this picture was to remind me to say that we did do that. And then we'd stop at an ice cream place and we'd get ice cream. And we were like in summer camp, having such a great time. And it was the summer, and we were on the Mary Sue schedules, so we had longer liberty. We had evenings off, and we had barbecues, and it was just fun. Anyway, and then here's a picture of my brother and Arthur Hubbard. They were both gun fanatics, and they used to go shooting in the desert. I just threw this one in there just because it was part of the having fun.
Is that Peter on the right and Arthur on the left?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
This was probably the Halloween party that they dressed up for as gunslingers. And there's my meringues. All right. So now we've been going along fine for 3 months, nothing from them. And then every day Gail used to look at the classified ads, because that's how we were supposed to get a message. Pat would put an ad in the paper wanting to meet. And so nothing happened for 3 months. And then we got a message they needed $50,000 cash.
Wow.
So what happens here is, let me see my notes here. Okay. Gail, here it is. Okay. Gail and Annie are going to take the $50,000 cash down. And the idea was to meet Pat in a movie theater. It was playing the World War II story of Julia. And anyway, so they were to go to the movie theater and wait for Pat and take the briefcase of money with them. Well, what they didn't know is that when they placed the ad to Pat as to when and where, it had to be in by 2 o'clock on Friday to show up in the Saturday paper. It didn't show up. But Gail and Annie went to the theater in a bad part of town outside of LA and sat through 2 showings of Julia waiting for Pat.
With $50,000 cash?
With $50,000 cash in a briefcase. In a briefcase. And they had no way of contacting Pat. So that's why they sat there through 2 showings, and they didn't know until later that their ad didn't make it into the paper because it was after 2 o'clock on Friday. So Pat never got the message. So Mary Sue, of course, was a little disappointed with them because that happened. And while they were there, they were now trying to figure out, well, what do we do? So I think they were trying to call Mary Sue or something. They were in a phone booth. And some hoodlums started hanging around. And they're in this phone booth together with $50,000 cash in a briefcase. And there's hoodlums hanging around outside. So they're like, didn't want to go out because they were afraid of what would happen. Well, Annie hangs up the phone and she is pissed. She slams out of that phone booth and just starts yelling at these guys. They're like, oh, okay. And they left. So Annie and Gail go and they get in the car and they come back. All right, so now we've still got to get that $50,000 to Pat. So the next week, I don't know where Annie was, but Mary Sue asked me to go with Gail and had Fred Hare go with us. So I can't hear you. Anyway, so
finally you had a man go with you too. I mean,
Yeah. So Mary Sue had Fred Hare go with us. And I think we're in Hubbard's Dodge Dart driving down to go watch Julia. So Gail's going to have to watch it now for a 3rd time. Anyway, driving down to LA, Fred's driving us. And I did not like country music at the time. And he had country music going. And this is the old country music where it's like everything's a sob story. The girl left him, And I'm like, Fred, can we change the channel? He's like, I'm the driver. I picked the music. Okay. Anyway, so Gail and I are in the theater now with the briefcase, and Pat shows up. And we do a briefcase switch. He just comes in, sits down. It's just like in the movies. We were in the movies. So he comes, sits down, switches briefcases, gets up and walks out. And we're now left with an empty briefcase.
Did he say anything to you or just no?
Nope.
Not hi or what, anything? Nothing?
Nope. We just sat down as if he was a stranger, switched out the briefcases and left. Anyway, so mission was successful. The $50,000 cash got picked up and taken. Now, apparently, though, Hubbard was very frugal because he didn't want to spend money and run out of money in case they were going to be gone a longer time period. So he wasn't big on spending money or anything like that.
Was the $50,000 just for expenses, like in case while they were on the run? Was that what it
Yeah.
was for?
Yeah, they paid everything in cash.
Right.
So the apartment was paid in cash, everything, the storage for the beauty. The car
Food,
was right. The car was put in storage. So they walked everywhere. And and the first 3 months, they didn't know what the GO was doing or anything like that. But every night when Hubbard was securing to go to bed, and as I mentioned earlier, he would sit there and talk to Dee Dee and Pat and Claire, and it was like he was trying to convince them and himself, and would claim to them that he had no idea what Mary Sue in the Guardian's office was doing. Now, I know
meaning about Snow White and the
about the infiltration of the U.S. government. Now, I know as a messenger on the ship and in Dunedin and in La Quinta at Rifle, every dinner Mary Sue would be the one doing most of the talking. And any time a messenger walked in that room, she'd shut up. So she was obviously telling him things that she didn't want the messengers to know. And I remember on the ship, he would bring up different things. He talked about Snow White and that, oh yeah, they're working on getting the information in the government that's false, getting it corrected, and they're doing Freedom of Information Act to get all the false information and then sending in the correct information. So I'm thinking, oh, it's all above boards. They're finding out what's false and sending in the correct information to fix it. No clue whatsoever about the infiltration and the photocopying of stealing people's files and that type of thing. No clue whatsoever. Anyway, nighttime, Hubbard's trying to convince himself, Pat, Claire, and Dee Dee that he knew nothing about it. So now he starts to fill his days. As I said, he was writing Revolt in the Stars. And then once that was finished, he sent it down to us. And we're sitting in the kitchen with nothing to do except make meringue pavlova. We're now given an assignment of turning his writing of Revolt in the Stars into a script. And so we were given a format, and so we just spent our hours in the kitchen sitting there typing the whole thing up into a screenplay in script form. So that's what we did. And he actually, that's when he was younger, but he actually sat there and typed, and he was kind of like a 2 to 3 finger typist, but he still typed really fast. Right. Anyway, so he cranked out Revolt in the Stars, and then we had the job typing it, retyping it. And then when that was done, he started working on the different Scientology movie scripts.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, just so people know, Revolt in the Stars, this is 1977, right?
Yes, it is.
Right. This is right when Star Wars had come out and had taken the country by storm, right, as far as the movie goes. And so he goes, oh, I got a story for you. We're going to do Revolt in the Stars, which is basically the OT3 story about Xenu and all that sort of stuff, right?
Exactly. Right? Yes, exactly. So like, here he is.
Advantage of this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So here he is. I was on OT3 at the time. And when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my God, but people are supposed to get sick if they see this, or hear the story, and I'm auditing on it every day. Anyway, so I just don't say anything to anybody else, but Hubbard's idea is maybe it would blow the incident for everybody if they see it on a big movie screen. And we can clear the planet faster that way. Anyway, and then once it was all typed up, Doreen and Liz Osley and a bunch of different people were all fired on projects to now go and get this movie accepted in Hollywood and made. And they made contact with Randy Eaton, who was a Scientologist, and he was already a producer and a director. And that's a whole nother story to go into their attempts to get the film accepted. So I'm not going to cover that here.
Right.
Anyway, so we're now kept busy typing up Revolt in the Stars. And then what happens is my mom, I have an approval to go on a leave and visit with my mom. And we had talked about probably going up to Santa Barbara to Cass House's place and staying there like we'd done previously. And Mom was going to take some time off and spend it with me. Well, I had it all approved by Annie. And there's a picture of Hubbard with Annie behind him. I had my leave all approved. And meanwhile, my mom had gone to Mexico. And while she was down there, she'd had a stroke. And this was late October 77, she had the stroke. And she came back, and someone tipped off my sister that my mom was ill and no one was going to tell her. So my sister goes over and finds her at the Wilcox, delirious. Now, no one tells me that my mom is sick. I'm still planning to go on leave, and I'm 2 days away from leaving. And I remind Annie that I'm going. And Annie says, well, you should delay. Your mom's not feeling well. And Ray Midoff's auditing her, and Paulette is CSK supervising her folder. So why don't you just delay so that you're not just sitting around while she's sick? Wait until she recovers and then go have a good time. I'm like, okay. So then I get a letter from my mother, and the letter is missing words and has lines through it. And it's like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And I went to Paulette, who had been down in LA, and I said, hey, how's my mom doing? And she says, oh, your mom's fine. I said, oh, she is? Well, Annie told me to delay my leave because she just wasn't doing well. She, and wait till she gets better. And I just got this letter that isn't coherent. And that's when Paulette says, Annie wasn't supposed to tell you that. We weren't going to tell you that your mother was sick. And I'm like, well, why not? Oh, well, she's getting audited and she's going to get better. Don't worry about it. All right. So then I'm told my sister's down there with her and not to worry. She'll be fine. Ray's auditing her and so forth. So then Hubbard sends down instructions for the messengers. We're all now to study the 5 C's of cinematography, because he has decided that he, with the messengers, are going to shoot the tech films. And so we all study the book. I'm going to study makeup. Miscavige and Yeager are doing video. My sister's going to do camera. We're all assigned different things. And so all our concentration's on that. Meanwhile, I hear my mom's doing fine. Don't worry about her. And that she's now going to Flag, and David Mayo's taking care of her. So we have Christmas, and then the 5th of January, I believe it is when Hubbard comes back, because, and we're going to do the 5 C's, and we've got to make sure all his spaces are ready. He's coming back, and he comes back on the 5th of January. And my mother's in Clearwater, dying, and no one has told me nor my brother that she's actually dying and has brain tumors. We're being told, don't worry about her. She'll be getting well. She's being taken care of. Anyway, so Hubbard comes back on the 5th of January, and we are all back on duty, and production is rolling, and I will continue the story in Messenger Series 10.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was a truck outside. That's amazing. Can I ask you a couple of questions about Hubbard?
Sure.
It's Pat, Claire, and Dee Dee are with Hubbard this whole time, from whenever it was, the summer until January.
July. July to January.
July, yeah, January 1978, January.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, when they came back, Pat was in trouble. Hubbard was furious with Pat because towards the end, Hubbard, just around Christmas time, he got a cold, and Pat was going to pick him up and take him. Pat was going to go and get Beauty from storage and pick up Hubbard and take him to the doctors. Pat went to storage, and no one had checked on the car in 6 months. All the tires were flat. and Hubbard's out front in a coat and a hat. It's cold. It's winter.
Right.
Waiting for Pat. Pat hasn't showed up. Finally, Pat shows up in a taxi because he couldn't pick up Beauty. Anyway, so
Beauty was the car.
Beauty was the car. Anyway, and then a week or two later, after Pat got that fixed, that's when they came back. But Hubbard was really upset with him over that one.
Yeah. It's funny because, Pat Broker was relied on then later. Him, Pat, and Annie were the ones who were with Hubbard, for while he was on the run until he finally died. But Hubbard got pissed off at Pat then too and barred him from the property up there in Creston. So it was really Annie and Steve Foff that were there when Hubbard died. Pat wasn't even there. He was at another property that they had.
Yeah, Hubbard had kicked him off the property and told him not to come back until he had an all clear so Hubbard could go back to the base in Hemet.
Yeah. Some of these, in retrospect on the story about this whole thing, like you mentioned, he left because the FBI raided because the Guardian's office, under Mary Sue's direction, and then with Fred Hare and Jimmy Mulligan and Mary Sue involved, and of course Hubbard knowing about it because he knew about everything. I mean, let's be honest, right? Yeah. Basically, they're in hiding. He has to go in hiding like a fugitive. You know what I mean? From the government. They dye their hair. They pay cash for everything and are in hiding. It's just unbelievable that what's going on when he's involved with this whole thing of them infiltrating and trying to get information on the U.S. government about Scientology and quote unquote correct it. And then it all falls apart.
Well, and also Hubbard actually wouldn't come back to La Quinta until Mary Sue had moved from Rifle to her house that they got for her in Los Feliz, California, because Hubbard didn't want to be where she was in case she brought the FBI in again. And also it was better for her to deal with her lawsuit and the criminal charges against her if she was in Los Angeles rather than out in La Quinta.
Yeah, so basically he was keeping everything at arm's length away from him. And now it's funny, I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about it because, we're learning about we're not lawyers, but I watched some of the trials and stuff that go on. And if you get if the government decides to criminally indict you, right, they have to have enough evidence to present to a jury that you will be convicted of the crimes beyond a reasonable doubt, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, by keeping an arm's length and vetting out all of those little orders and taking all that stuff and saying, oh, no, I didn't know anything about it. That was all Mary Sue and this other thing. He was keeping a distance from himself, basically to protect himself and throw everybody else under the bus. And and then eventually Hubbard was an unindicted co-conspirator when they did file charges against Mary Sue and all the Guardian's office people, because they knew that the government knew that he was involved, but they didn't have enough evidence. I'm sure that's why they didn't indict him to go, we can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. And I mean, I was thinking about that today, thinking, they couldn't really prove it to the point where the last thing they wanted to do was indict him and then have him found not guilty and then all these other people guilty. So it's
right. And here's part of what caused some of the problem was Hubbard, of course, probably was sitting down giving instructions to Mary Sue. He didn't put it in writing. But Mary Sue didn't type. She hand wrote, or Nikki typed for her. So Mary Sue had written all her instructions in her own handwriting to Henning Helt, who was the deputy guardian U.S.
Right.
So he was at the manor on the 6th floor, and he had a red box on his desk with all of Mary Sue's instructions to him. And he was supposed to take that home every night and not leave it anywhere. So that if he had to go, he took that box with him. Well, he wasn't doing that. So when the FBI raided, that red box of Mary Sue's handwritten instructions was on his desk. And that's how they nailed Mary Sue.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And it's they eventually did a plea deal instead, because it was better for Mary Sue and everybody to take a plea deal than, do the whole embarrassment of the whole trial and stuff, because they would have really had to spend a lot of time in prison. But again, it's pretty amazing. I mean, that this was all going on. And then I'm thinking about, years later, Hubbard's put, Dee Dee and Claire and Gail and you and everybody in jeopardy when you didn't even know what was going on, meaning you're taking $50,000 cash to meet secretly, in an area. Hubbard's in hiding, you know what I mean? And it's just like, he didn't even think about anybody in terms of their danger or well-being. It was all about keeping himself safe.
And you know what? I never even thought of it that way, because to me, it was my job. Okay, right. Hubbard needs money. I better get it to him,
No, it sounds like, I mean, when you're telling me these stories, I of them being in hiding and, faking a sick to see a doctor and dyeing their hair and all that, it sounds like Bonnie and Clyde. It sounds like, the Manson family in hiding, you know what I mean? Because they didn't want to get caught. It's pretty amazing,
Yeah, but we didn't have, no dead bodies were left behind.
No. But it's similar type of behavior in terms of all sorts of criminals that are in hiding and on the run. They don't want to be found. And so they take these actions. And basically, he brought you all along with him, the ones that were with him on that, the ones that were at W. Of course, you guys were safe and were doing your thing. But it's amazing to think about that in retrospect, in terms of the danger that he was placing everybody in. Why? To save himself. His wife wasn't even saved by it,
Right. I've got another funny story. I'm just looking at my notes and stuff. And this is how Hubbard always felt. He knew better and would always kind of give advice. And no matter what you were doing, he did this. And when we did mail packs between each other, we used to, you get an envelope and you put razor blade slices through it, and then you cover it with tape and you slice that, and then you heat the tape so that if anyone tried to pull it apart, you could see if someone got into your envelope. And then under the flap, you'd put your signature before you sealed it up. Well, Claire, Pat, and Dee Dee were writing some personal letters to everybody, and so they were putting on lipstick and kissing the paper or the envelopes. And Hubbard comes out and sees them doing this. So now he starts giving them instructions and correcting them on how to put on lipstick, because they're putting it on. They're putting it on to make sure every little crack is filled to get that perfect kiss on the paper. So he's now telling, well, this is how you really put on lipstick. But that's how he was. You're doing little things like that, and he would tell you, just like with that tree with Steve, right. He knows better than the label on the box.
Yeah. And then here's how you disguise yourself. You put cotton in your mouth and you put on a hat with, you look like you're in disguise. I've seen the photograph of Hubbard with the stupid hat and the fake wig on,
Right. Right.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, That was a great story, Janis. Really appreciate it.
You're
And we will
welcome.
carry on with the next one in the series. But I just wanted to remind everybody, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We really appreciate the support there. And then if you've got any questions or comments about this video, please do them down below, and we respond to them and all that. If you'd like to support our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link down below. Go down there, click on it. You can buy us 1, 2, 3, 100 coffees, whatever you want. But any support that you provide, we really appreciate it. It helps us continue. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is you can be a member, become a member of our channel, just on the same homepage for our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. Right next to the subscribe button, there's a button that says join. Just click on that. You've got to be on your PC or laptop, but just click on that. There's a little video that explains our different membership levels, and there's different perks that you get with them, including if you become a peeling master, you get an autographed copy of one of Janis's book signed by her and sent to you as part of the membership for free. So anyway, if you're interested in being a member, we really appreciate it. It gives us support as well for the channel. Just go to our homepage, click on that join button, and we wanted to say that. Anyway, Janis, have you got anything else you wanted to say before we end off here?
Just there was no memo, but we still matched.
Our shirts kind of were Hawaiian-y and all that sort of thing.
The blue, yeah.
The blue. Okay, everybody.
Anyway, thank you for listening.
Yeah, until next time, everybody. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.